Welcome to Tim Tschida the Show. This episode is the first in a series of discussions with the incomparable former Major League pitcher, Curt Schilling.
Yep, the Curt Schilling. And you know, in my own 3 words, guts, glory, and politics pretty much sums up Mr. Schilling, besides having a Hall of Fame type pitching career, as well as a great broadcasting career too. So welcome, Curt. We're really honored to have you with us. And I'm just here to referee the session. I'm kind of the third person in the ring, if you will. So I'm going to turn you over to Tim. But I want to start off by just having you tell Tim and our audience the burning question we all have. Have you ever been ejected?
I was ejected one time by the kindest umpire in the history of the major leagues, Randy Marsh. I was ejected after I'd been thrown out of the game, after I was coming out of the game. And I had thrown and hit John Wayner for Florida after Al Fonseca of Florida had hit Scott Rowland. And Randy ejected me like uncomfortably. Like it was such an unenthusiastic ejection. And Randy was a great guy, super, super nice. And when I was in the National League, it was a big deal because you always interacted with the umpires as a pitcher in the National League because you were hitting. And I would always talk to Randy, and I love him to death, but Randy's strike zone was the one word we all dread, which was inconsistent. And Randy on some days could be Eric Gregg, and on other days he could be C.B. Buckner. And I say that, and you know, Timmy's going to do that a lot during the show, but that was the only time. I was raised by a good man. I played the game hard. I played the game right. And I respected the game and everybody in it. And I understood that part of the game was one of the games I had to play was with the umpires, because getting the hitter out was a big enough challenge. If I had to get the hitter out and convince the umpire I wasn't an asshole, then that was even harder. So I worked very hard to have a good relationship with all my umpires.
My guess was going to be that it never happened. If it did happen, it may have happened once, and I bet it was a throwing incident, and it would have been in a retaliation, not a starting the problem type of thing,
Right.
or a off the bench kind of thing.
Right.
But you were a smart enough guy to know that you don't yell at an umpire off the bench either, because
I respected the game, Timmy.
You did respect the game, and you respected us. And
the thing I learned about you guys. The hard part for Timmy was he was trying to be the best in the world and never be noticed. Think that those two don't go together. And in baseball, when I was a couple years in and I had been talking to everybody that I could about being good at the game and all the things that went with that, my spring training, the highlight day, most important day of my spring training was when the umpire's media guide came out.
Yeah.
That and the umpire's schedule, because it was a media guide like any team media guide, had all the facts about these guys and all the schools and where they went to school, what their hobbies, what their interests and everything was. Because in the National League, I would hit, and a lot of times when the pitcher comes to the plate, the defense is doing a realignment, they're setting up a bunt defense or whatever. So I would get a little bit of time to talk to the umpires. And Wally Bell, I used to say, Wally, Nebraska sucks, because he was a Nebraska alum, and he would just MF me and back and forth. But it was all for me. As I got older, I knew my umpires, but they had good days and bad days. And I would want to know someday, what kind of mood is he in? Because I knew when I had Eric Gregg behind the plate for a day game, he was going to call every single pitch a strike so he could end the game as quickly as possible. Because
you might not break a sweat on that day.
But it was, and you realized it was one of the reasons I always thought that they should have had a conditioning protocol, because I don't remember Eric finishing a day game in the summertime ever.
Yeah.
He would have to come out in the 7th and 8th inning because he was physically beat.
Yeah.
And, for his own good, I wish he would probably still be here today if they had pushed him to. Phenomenal guy, great guy.
Yep.
And Timmy will tell you, and I'll tell you this, I want an umpire who's going to call a ball a strike. I love that.
Sure.
But I didn't plan for it. Right. So I needed to know, and the word you'll hear me talk about with Timmy and one of all the great umpires I played with was consistency. If it's strike one, it damn well better be strike three. And if it's ball one, don't shock me late in the count and have me go, oh, wow, that's a strike. because that's the one thing hitters and pitchers despise. I wanted the guy with the bigger strike zone. That would be great. And Timmy wasn't a big strike zone guy, but Timmy was a consistent strike zone guy. And so I would use my first inning. I would go out, and I didn't mix in. I always look at one of the litmus tests for good pitchers is I can't need to use all my pitches every single inning to get every hitter out. So I would use on the days when I was going well, I could move my fastball 4 and 6 inches at a time. So I would use the first inning to figure out where Timmy was today. Right. And it was usually mostly the same place. And Timmy was a guy who I knew was a little bit more consistent on the inner half to hitters, because the inner half to hitters was always I would work down in a way almost exclusive. Johnny Padres taught me. But when I wanted to go in, I wanted to go in one time. And if I made that pitch, I needed it called. This is how I found out about young umpires. If I threw a ball right down the middle and they called it a ball, and I knew it was a strike, everybody knew it was a strike, I would say something. I would just make a gesture like, is that ball away? And knowing it wasn't, and the bad ones would go, yep, that was away. Yep, sure was. And I'd be like, you're so full of crap. It wasn't away. That ball's right down the middle. But the good ones, like Eddie Rapuano was another one who was fun. Teddy Barrett, they would tap their chest like, no, I missed that.
Tell the truth.
And I always tell young umpires, you can never, ever have a problem with a player if you admit when you make a mistake.
Right.
Ever. Because there are guys like Bernie Williams and Steve Finley and Paul O'Neill. They never took a strike in their lives.
Right.
And
neither did Eddie Murray.
I was just going to say that name.
Right. But I understand. I knew when that guy was at the plate, a lot of umpires, they couldn't wait to ring those guys up because they were so tired of the BS. Because what that does is it immediately puts the home crowd, if the hitter's hitting, against the umpire. Now you've made my job harder today, and this is going to be a miserable day. And I would always try and take advantage of that. And then there were other guys, and like I said, C.B. Buckner was a very nice guy. Mm-hmm. Very nice guy. Horrific umpire. Horrific. And it was an inconsistency. He was afraid to make a mistake, so he always made them. And Greg Gibson to me was the same way. And Greg, no lie, Timmy, we had Greg Gibson at first base one night, and we're in Philly in the old vet, and he blows a call at first, and he had been to home plate. He was going to home plate the next day, and and Mirabelli's lighting him up from the bench, and Greg thinks it's me. And he walks over to our dugout, and Greg says, "You realize you're arguing with the best young umpire in baseball right now, right?" And our whole bench went, blew up. Oh my God, you don't say that, dude. That's just asking for trouble.
That's a bad choice of words there.
I had all this stuff in my book. And I knew, because so when I got my schedule in spring training, I was looking at, okay, I knew how things rotated, and I knew they took vacations and all the things to go with that. But I knew my first 5 or 6 starts of the year who was going to be my home plate umpire. Now, it didn't do anything other than for me to say, okay, Teddy Barrett's behind the plate. All right, Teddy's very consistent umpire.
Yep.
If I'm going to get a little, I'll get it on the outside corner.
Correct.
I can't go high in the zone. Angel Hernandez, as bad as he was, the thing I knew about Angel was excited to be different. He always wanted to be innovative. So when they talked about, when they started making those changes with the strike zone, Angel would always tell the catchers, hey, listen, don't set up off the plate. I'm not calling it if you set up out there. And he also made it known that he would call the curveball that came in high and ended low, because in his mind, that was crossing the top of the strike zone. So I would throw more curveballs with Angel behind the plate and things like that.
Sure.
And in Timmy's book, I laughed because I looked at it the other night. I was in 20 years in the big league, so I had Timmy for a long, long time.
Yep.
And it's funny because the first line is, can get the red ass quicker than most guys, but doesn't drag it along. Like if he's mad at you on this at pitch, he's not going to be mad at you at the next pitch for the most part.
Nope.
So I knew, and that which told me, hey, listen, when I communicate with him, I don't want to do it in a way that shows him up.
Yep.
And I'll do it
walking in
at the end of the inning, or I'll do it in my at bat. And then I would always have my catchers, Gary Bennett, but I always told my catchers, I don't care. And I said, I know this sounds personal. I don't care if you go 0 for 4, but I need you to call my game, and I need you to manage my umpire. And I could get a feel for it, because I would, a lot of times before I'd go to Tim, I'd say, hey, Mike, did was that not a strike? And he goes, and he would be honest with me.
Yep.
And Timmy would be honest with him. So there was never a Timmy, what the fuck? The John Schmaltz, John never threw a ball.
Nope, never.
Ever. And I knew, like I said, it was a game within the game, and it was part of. The difference was I was getting paid $13 million a year, an exorbitant amount of money to win, not pitch.
Right.
There's a difference. I wasn't getting paid to pitch. Andy Bennis made more money than I think any pitcher in the 90s, and he was a 500 pitcher, but he took the post every fifth day. And the value was in pitching, so I thought it was going to be, I could elevate my value by winning and being good.
I'm pretty sure I was at second base for your first start, because I know Stevie had the plate, Stevie Palermo. And I remember the story you shared on your podcast, and you're more than welcome to go there again. Stevie was very influential in my career. I worked my first year with him and Richie Garcia, who were two of the guys
by the way, Timmy, I'm getting chills now because
two of the most gifted umpires I ever worked with, and so unselfish in sharing everything they knew with you quickly. And one thing Richie said to me early in my career, I had to play, when you get there for the first time, you want to just look like you belong, and because you got a target on your back no matter what. And I had to play at second base. It was a force out to end an inning, and it wasn't wide open, and it wasn't close. The guy was out, easy out, and I just firmly called him out. And after Richie never liked to talk about things in the locker room after the game, because he said, you're still pumped up. He said, we'll talk about it at the bar afterwards, or maybe breakfast tomorrow or whatever. And he said to me, hey, you're doing a good job. He says, just don't do anything nonchalant. So always look like you're ready for it. Let them know that you're giving it everything you got, and they will cut you slack. He said they will, if they know you're trying, what can they say? And Stevie told me the same thing, and they both were kind enough to tell me early on. Richie looked right at me. He says, "You're gifted. You're gifted for this job." And
I'm very curious, Timmy. I'm very curious to know the thing that I didn't realize till later on was there is no jump like getting to the big leagues. No matter, I don't care if you come from AAA or the AA.
Nope.
And I'm wondering, and that's where the rubber meets the road for players, right? The speed of the game is either too much or too little. I can't imagine it's any different for umpires.
It's not.
The speed of the game in the big leagues is so much faster than everything else. And I'm wondering, when did you realize that? And what went through your head when you realized that, oh my God, these guys are doing things at a pace that's unseeable?
Very early on, and basically, what it becomes a mindset. You have to have a plan. You have to have a set of a ritual that you do on a regular basis, and that is that you have to assume. Richie taught me something, and I taught this to every guy I ever taught at umpire school, and anybody that ever worked on my crew down the road, that there is no such thing as a routine play.
Right.
Well, it's a routine play. There is no such thing as a routine play in the major leagues, because these guys play for money, big money. And you have to assume that every play that's coming at you is going to be close. And if it turns out to not be close, you got lucky. Right. But you got to realize, just for a simple statistic, going from T-ball to all the way to the major leagues, or even the family softball game on the 4th of July, the fastest player leads off. Okay, and then in a normal baseball game, close to 80% of all outs occur at first base. So if you're working first base that night, you better be ready to go like now. You don't work your way into that game. Who do you got? You got Ricky Henderson. You got Kenny Lofton. You got Vince Coleman. Let's keep naming them. So the odds are in your favor already. You're going to have a banger just to start it up. Right. You better get that one right. Because you can miss, if you miss that, you can have 10 more and get them all right, and they're not going to believe you the rest of the night, because you weren't ready for the first one. And they resent that. And they should resent that. And those guys were so influential in my career that I just, whatever they taught me, I taught my guys.
But there was a thing. So at some point when the cameras started to come into the game, I'll never forget it. I got fined by the league maybe 3 or 4 times in my life, but I was at we were playing a game in Arizona. I'm walking up to the plate, and the inning before I had thrown. God, it was a good umpire. It was a nice umpire. Anyway, I got to the plate and there was a timeout, and I looked at him and I said, "Hey, listen, I thought there were 3 or 4 pitches last inning that I nailed, and they were corner tight, but all 4 were balls." And he looks to his left to the on deck circle, and he points to the Questec camera and said, "The camera won't let me call that a strike." And I stepped out of the box. I'm like, "What the fuck did you just say?"
Where's that camera?
And he goes, "The camera won't let me call that pitch." And a lot of people don't know. And I think in my professional athlete mind, I'm thinking it's BS, but I realized why. There was a grace period or a grace area on both sides of the plate where the umpires didn't get judged. And my problem with that was that's where I have to live. Right. So I said, "Oh, okay. All right." I struck out. I walked back. As I'm walking back, I walked the on deck circle and I start beating the shit out of this camera. Just beating the shit out of it.
I would have come and done it with you, by the way.
Dude. So and it didn't go any way I thought. Right. Yeah. I get done and I come back to the mound, and Hunter Wendelstedt comes to me at the mound. He goes, "Listen, I'm going to make sure every umpire in the league knows we love you." And I'm laughing. He goes, "That was the fucking best thing I've ever seen." Yeah. And I didn't realize, and I realize now why. It was obvious. No one wants to be.
We hated it.
Well, but here's the problem. The game moves so fast that I have to trust the human instinct behind the plate.
Right.
And so I'm not looking. I would love to have perfection, but like Maddox, everybody said, "Oh, Maddox threw balls that called strikes." Well, Maddox had the talent and the capability to move the ball an inch at a time. If you had that, you would have gotten the same pitches.
No question.
And, you can look back and see, balls called off the plate, blah, 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 whatever it was. But it gets back to that word, consistency. If I throw it and it's strike 1, the hitter knows it, I know it, the umpire knows it, the fans know it. When I throw it for strike 3, it better be strike 3.
Right.
Now, if you call a ball a strike and you don't call the strike later on, okay.
In our minds, that was never considered a missed pitch. A missed pitch is when you call the strike a ball. We don't want to do that. Nobody wants to do that. Again, that's a philosophy going back to every play is going to be close. When you're working home plate, when the pitcher lets go of the ball, that pitch is a strike until it proves that it's not.
Right.
Then you call it a ball. If you could have called it a strike, you should have. And that's going to be the same for both teams. And as you spoke earlier about your catchers, and you had 2 really nothing but good ones, and I'm not going to slight anyone, but Darren Dalton and Gary Bennett. Gary's daughter, in fact, goes to the University of Minnesota, and I see him up here once in a while. So, but those guys, in working with them.
Notice Al too. He talks about working with the catcher.
Correct.
Good umpires, bad ones don't talk like that.
No.
But he knew, and Gary, great you mentioned Gary, because Todd Pratt was another one. Rod Barajas was another one. Chad Muller. They all understood that their backup jobs, their relationship with the umpire, for me, I'd like to have the same catcher. I was Maddox in a sense. I wanted one guy all year. I didn't necessarily have to be a specific guy, but I wanted the consistency. Because I wanted to, pace of play was one of my strengths. I got the ball.
You never needed a pitch clock.
And I pitched.
Right.
And I didn't want to shake off. I didn't want the umpire stuff. So again, same thing. They would sit back there and manage and talk through, and I would get my Q&A done on the bench instead of on the field.
The other thing that those guys would do is if one of their teammates came back to the dugout grumbling about a strike call on him, they would go to him and say, "Knock it off. Leave him alone, because we're getting that pitch. You're going to have to swing at that pitch. Whether you like it or not, that's the way it is today."
Next time, Tim and Curt Schilling talk more about the Questec camera system and that annoying little box on your TV screen that's supposed to represent the strike zone. And you can join Curt Schilling on his The Complete Game podcast. The link is found in the description below, or use your favorite search page.